I wish I had never given birth to you." Those weren't the words of a stranger. They weren't from an enemy. They were a birthday gift from my own mother, delivered with a cold smile in a room full of people celebrating the day I was born. My name is Olivia. And that was the moment the girl she raised died, and a woman she couldn't control began to rise from the ashes. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reached. Don't forget to subscribe and join me on this journey where the unspoken feelings of the past finally find their voice. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. The firestorm that consumed my family didn't start with a roar. It started with a quiet tremor weeks earlier. In the one place on Earth I felt completely safe, my lab on 47th Street. In the heart of New York's Diamond District, my world was an orderly universe of controlled light and immense pressure not unlike the gems I studied. Under the focused beam of my microscope lamp, a 2-carat Asher-cut diamond floated in the tweezer's grip. To anyone else, it was a sparkler. To me, it was a story waiting to be read. I wasn't just looking at the stone. I was reading its history through the language of its flaws, the microscopic crystals, the faint feathers, the subtle whispers of its billion-year journey from the Earth's mantle to this velvet-lined tray. My job was to find the truth hidden within the brilliance, and I was good at it. My focus was absolute the city's chaos, muted beyond the reinforced walls. I gently rotated the stone. There, a pinpoint inclusion nestled deep within a facet, so small the previous gemologist had graded it, VVS1 very, very slightly included. But my eye caught the way it diffracted the light, a tiny discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. It was a VVS2. A small difference, but in our world, small differences are measured in thousands of dollars. I logged the new grade and leaned back the leather of my chair, groaning in the silence. My boss, Mr. Abramov, a man whose family had been cutting diamonds since the czars, reviewed my report later that day. He peered through his own loupe, then looked at me over the rims of his glasses, a rare smile touching his lips. "The sterling eye strikes again," he said, his Russian accent thick as honey. "You see what others miss, Ava. It is a gift. That gift was my ticket out. It was the foundation of my entire future." My phone buzzed, pulling me from the world of karats and clarity. The caller ID read Dad. I smiled, the tension in my shoulders easing. "How are my beautiful gems?" His voice boomed, warm and full of life, a stark contrast to the clinical quiet of my lab. "The inanimate ones are flawless, as usual." I laughed. "How's retired life in the desert?" "Too much sunshine, not enough of my daughters," he said, and I could picture him on the patio of their Scottsdale home, golf shirt on, overlooking the pristine green of the 9th hole. We never talked much about money. Dad was a retired real estate developer who had built his fortune on seeing the solid foundations others missed. He appreciated my work not for its monetary value, but for its substance. Find any new worlds in those stones today? Just a few tiny ones. And I saved your future son-in-law, whoever he may be, a couple of grand on an engagement ring." He chuckled. "That's my girl. Speaking of which, the final papers from the bank came through. The trust will liquidate right on schedule the week of your 30th. Are you ready?" My heart did a little flip. Ready as I'll ever be, Dad. $500,000. The number still felt unreal. It was the seed capital for my own brand, Sterling Gems, a bespoke jewelry studio built on ethically sourced stones and transparent craftsmanship. It was more than money. It was his belief in me made tangible. "This isn't a gift, Ava," he said, as if reading my mind. "It's my investment in your talent. You've earned it." We talked for a few more minutes, and just before we hung up, he sighed. "By the way, your sister has started some new lifestyle brand online. I don't quite get it, but it looks expensive." There it was, that familiar note of weariness in his voice, the slight dip that always appeared when he spoke of Chloe. After the call, a morbid curiosity got the better of me. I opened Instagram. Chloe's profile was an explosion of sun-drenched perfection. Her laughing on a yacht in Miami, a video of her unboxing a new designer handbag, the price of which could have covered my rent for 3 months. A caption under a photo of her at a 5-star resort read, "Stop dreaming, start doing." A memory sharp and unwelcome flashed in my mind. I was 10 on a beach in California, meticulously building a sandcastle with elaborate towers and a moat. Chloe, 2 years older, had watched from a distance. Just as I placed the final perfect seashell on the highest turret she'd run over, stomped the entire thing into a flat, wet mess, and snatched the shell for her own collection. She hadn't done it out of malice. She'd done it simply because she wanted the shell, and destroying my creation was the quickest way to get it. I closed the app, a familiar hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was the vast, unbridgeable distance between us. I was a builder. She was a taker. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me that I would use my $500 to $1,000 to build something real, something she could never, ever touch. 2 weeks later, the first tremor hit. It arrived not as a dramatic phone call, but as a quiet, unassuming email from a fellow gemologist, a collector named Marcus, who specialized in rare colored stones. The subject line was simple: "Extraordinary Tanzanite, Scottsdale." My pulse quickened. I clicked it open. The email was brief, containing a high-resolution photo and a short description. A near-flawless violet blue Tanzanite, over 20 carats cushion cut. It was being offered for sale by a private anonymous seller in Scottsdale, Arizona. A cold dread washed over me. It couldn't be. I pulled up a file on my computer, my hands trembling slightly. There, it was a photo of the same stone sent to me 6 months ago by the owner of a small independent mine in Tanzania. I had been cultivating a relationship with him for a year, drawn by his commitment to ethical mining practices. This specific stone, with its unique dichorism, flashing from sapphire blue to deep amethyst depending on the light, was to be the cornerstone of my inaugural collection, Sterling Gems. We had a verbal agreement. He was holding it for me until my funds were released. The stone in Marcus's email was not just similar, it was identical. The same slight inclusion near the girdle, the same perfect saturation. My cornerstone, my showpiece. And it was for sale in my family's hometown. I immediately called the mine owner in Tanzania. The line crackled, and when he finally answered, his voice was hesitant, evasive. "Ah, Miss Sterling, I was going to call you." "What happened, Joseph?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The 20-carat violet blue. It's on the market in Arizona." He was silent for a long moment. "An American investor," he finally stammered. She made an offer a significant amount over your projected price. In cash. She wanted the deal closed immediately." "I'm sorry, Ava. My family." The offer was too much to refuse. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. An investor who, how did she even know about the stone? The information was private. I don't know. She had a lawyer handle everything, very discreet. A lawyer in Scottsdale. An anonymous seller. A private deal for a stone that almost no one knew existed. The coincidence was too great, too pointed. This didn't feel like a business deal gone wrong. It felt personal. It felt like targeted sabotage. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I called the Scottsdale law firm Marcus had mentioned in his email. I posed as a potential buyer, interested in the tanzanite. The paralegal who answered was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that piece is part of a private estate sale. We are not at liberty to disclose any information about the seller or the terms of the acquisition. It is not open to public inquiry." A dead end. I hung up the phone, the silence of my lab suddenly suffocating. My dream, which had felt so solid and close, had just had its heart ripped out. I stared at the intricate design I had sketched for the stone, a platinum pendant meant to showcase its otherworldly color. Now, it was just a drawing of something I'd lost a ghost on a piece of paper, and I had no idea who had stolen it from me. The next tremor came 4 days later. My phone rang, and Chloe's name flashed on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me answer. Her voice was different from the cheerful, vacuous tone of her Instagram videos. It was tight, laced with a convincing theatrical worry. "Ava, thank God you answered." "Chloe, what's wrong?" She started with small talk, asking about work, but quickly cut to the chase. "Listen, Ava, I'm calling because, well, I don't want you to worry when you see Dad at his party next week." A knot formed in my stomach. Worry about what I just spoke to him. He seemed fine. "That's the thing," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's putting on a brave face. A really brave face." She proceeded to weave an elaborate, horrifying story. Dad, she claimed, had been caught on the wrong side of a massive commercial real estate deal that had gone south. He was facing a catastrophic loss, something so significant it could jeopardize their parents' financial security. He was, she said deeply, ashamed and didn't want anyone to know, especially me. He didn't want to burden me or derail my plans. His 65th birthday party is incredibly important for him. Chloe emphasized, her voice cracking with fake emotion. It's about keeping up appearances for his business partners, showing everyone that everything is fine. So when you come home, please, please do not mention anything about business or money, especially not your trust fund. He's feeling so much pressure, so guilty, that he can't give you more right now. The story was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. It took my love for my father and weaponized it. It explained away his cheerful demeanor as a brave performance. It recast my silence not as ignorance, but as an act of sensitivity and grace. And most insidiously, it created a protective bubble around the one topic, my $500,000 that she needed to keep hidden. A part of me wanted to believe her. It would explain the vague sense of stress I'd sometimes picked up from my parents. But my gemologist's brain, the part of me trained to spot flaws, was screaming that something was wrong. My father was the most transparent man I knew. He had never hidden anything from me. And then the two tremors connected. The phantom investor in Scottsdale, the stolen tanzanite, the sudden desperate need to keep me from talking about money. Were they related? Was I paranoid? "Ava, are you there?" Chloe's voice pulled me back. "Yes." I said, my own voice flat. "I understand. I'll be discreet. Thank you. She breathed a wave of relief in her tone. You have no idea what this means to him. As soon as I hung up, I knew I couldn't let it go. I was a professional seeker of truth, and my own life had just become a puzzle box of lies. I didn't hesitate. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my determined face. I wasn't just booking a flight to Phoenix for a party anymore. I was flying home for a forensic investigation. I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the glittering, indifferent skyline of New York City. But my mind was already 1,000 miles away, in the sun-bleached perfection of Scottsdale. I felt like I was walking into a fog one carefully crafted by my own family. And I knew, with a certainty that made my blood run cold, that something ugly was waiting for me inside it. Flying into Phoenix Sky Harbor is like descending into a different world. The hazy, vertical canyons of Manhattan gave way to a vast, open expanse under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. As I drove the rented convertible toward Scottsdale, giant saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels guarding the manicured lawns of multi-million-dollar villas. It was a landscape of curated perfection, a beautiful sun-drenched facade that did little to calm the chaos churning in my gut. The family home was a sprawling adobe-style mansion that backed onto a championship golf course. It was a beautiful cage. My mother, Catherine, met me at the door, her smile a little too bright, her hug a little too tight. Ava, darling, you're here. Was the flight dreadful? You look tired. Are you eating enough in that city? She fired off questions like a machine gun, a verbal smokescreen designed to avoid any real conversation. She talked about the weather, the party preparations, the caterer, anything and everything, except the one thing that mattered. Then Dad appeared, and the first crack in Chloe's story showed. He wasn't pale or strained. He was tan, relaxed, and brimming with a genuine, uncomplicated happiness. He wrapped me in a bear hug that smelled of sunshine and expensive cologne. There's my girl. He beamed, holding me at arm's length. Just in time. I need your opinion on the seating chart. I'm trying to keep Bob and his ex-wife at opposite ends of the ballroom. He was excited, energetic, and completely devoid of the crushing financial anxiety Chloe had described. This wasn't a man performing bravery. This was a man thriving. Before I could even process the disconnect, Chloe swept in, linking her arm through mine and steering me toward the patio. Her performance was flawless. See? She whispered, her voice full of feigned sympathy. He's putting on a brave face for us. For everyone. Don't let it fool you, Ava. He's breaking inside. She squeezed my arm, her eyes wide with a manufactured sincerity. He even told me not to tell you he was struggling because he was afraid you'd cancel your plans to help him. His pride is all he has left right now. Her words were a masterclass in psychological warfare. She took the truth I was seeing with my own eyes, Dad's happiness, and twisted it into a piece of evidence for her lie. I was trapped. To challenge her would be to challenge my father's supposed pride. She had made me a co-conspirator in a cover-up that I was beginning to suspect was entirely fake. The moment I could get away, I told him I needed to bring my bags to my room. I needed a space to think. On my way, I passed Chloe's open bedroom door and stopped intending to ask where the spare phone charger was. But I never asked the question. Her room looked like the inside of a Neiman Marcus catalog. Shopping bags from Chanel and Dior were piled in a corner, but it was the item on her polished white vanity that made the air leave my lungs. A sleek silver Maserati key fob. Next to it, a leather-bound folder. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The folder contained the insurance and registration documents for a brand new Maserati Ghibli. Owner Chloe Sterling. Purchase date 8 days ago. A six-figure car. Bought just over a week ago in the middle of our father's supposed financial collapse. It wasn't just reckless, it was a declaration. My vague, formless suspicion now had a shape, and it was the gleaming, impossible silhouette of a luxury sports car. I couldn't wait. The questions were burning a hole in my mind. I found Chloe by the pool, lounging on a chaise and scrolling through her phone as if she didn't have a care in the world. The turquoise water glittered, the sun was warm, but all I felt was ice. I walked straight up to her, holding the Maserati keys between my thumb and forefinger. They felt unnaturally heavy. This car. Explain it, I said, my voice low and tight. I don't understand how you could do this when Dad is about to lose everything. Chloe didn't even flinch. She slowly lowered her phone, took off her designer sunglasses, and sighed. It was the long-suffering sigh of a genius, trying to explain a complex theorem to a child. I was hoping I wouldn't have to tell you this way, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. I wanted it to be a surprise once the results were in. She sat up, her expression shifting into one of intense seriousness. The story about Dad being in trouble? It was a cover. A white lie to protect a much bigger secret. My mind braced for another lie, but I wasn't prepared for the sheer audacity of this one. I've discovered the investment opportunity of a lifetime, she said, her eyes gleaming. A friend of mine from Stanford founded a biotech startup. They're on the verge of a patent that will revolutionize regenerative medicine. The initial investor round was closing, and it was a now or never situation. It required a significant buy-in, and it had to happen fast. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. I knew you'd hesitate, Ava. You analyze everything to death, so Mom and I made an executive decision. We acted. I borrowed the $500,000 from your trust. Mom co-signed the authorization. This isn't spending, Ava. This is building you an empire. This is making your money work for you in a way you couldn't even imagine. As if on cue, my mother walked out onto the patio. She saw us, her face tensing for a moment before settling into a look of weary resolve. Chloe opened her tablet and showed me a screen filled with what looked like a professional prospectus, charts, projections, scientific jargon. And the Maserati, Chloe said with a triumphant flick of her wrist. It's a company car, part of the package for seed investors to project an image of success. I didn't buy it. My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on Chloe's shoulder. I was so nervous. Ava, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But Chloe's friend is brilliant. He showed me the patents. I just wanted what was best for both of you. The air rushed out of me. The story was insane, reckless, but plausible. In a world of overnight tech billionaires, it wasn't impossible. For a dizzying moment, my anger dissolved into a confusing cocktail of doubt, hope, and a pang of guilt for thinking the worst. They hadn't betrayed me. They had taken a wild gamble on my behalf. The tension was almost gone, the mystery almost solved. Maybe Chloe wasn't a villain, just a reckless visionary. But my professional skepticism, the part of me that looks for the flaw in the facet, kicked in. Can I see the official wire transfer confirmation? I asked, my voice even. And the signed investment contract. For the first time, Chloe hesitated. A flicker of something panic crossed her eyes before she masked it. Of course, she said a little too quickly. It's all with the attorneys. They're finalizing the paperwork. We'll have everything by next week." It was a tiny hesitation, a minuscule flaw, but in a diamond that was supposed to be perfect, it was the only thing I could see. The morning of the party, I felt like I was living in a fog. Chloe's story was a constant loop in my head, a perfectly constructed narrative that felt both completely insane and strangely believable. That tiny hesitation was the only thing I could cling to. I couldn't face them. I made an excuse and drove to have lunch with the one person in my family whose judgment was as sharp and unclouded as a flawless diamond, my Aunt Isabel. We met at a quiet bistro in Old Town Scottsdale. Isabel, the director of jewelry for a prestigious auction house, was the epitome of elegance and intellect. She listened intently as I laid out the entire sordid story: the stolen tanzanite, the lie about Dad's finances, and finally, Chloe's grand tale of a biotech startup. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. She simply took a slow sip of her iced tea, her eyes thoughtful. Then, with the calm, precise air of a surgeon, she dissected every one of Chloe's lies. First, she began setting her glass down gently. "Your father, Richard, just closed one of the biggest deals of his career 2 weeks ago. His finances aren't just fine, they're spectacular." My heart sank. Second, Chloe's brilliant biotech friend. I know his family. The boy was just cut off by his father for gambling away his trust fund. He doesn't have a startup. He has a serious problem. I felt sick. And third, she said, her eyes meeting mine with a look of profound sympathy. "The Maserati." She paused. "I was at the dealership last week getting my own car serviced. I saw Chloe there. She wasn't signing a company lease Ava. She was paying for it, in full, with a cashier's check. I saw it with my own eyes." Isabel then delivered the final devastating blow. And to top it off, I saw her at an auction last week. She won the bid on a vintage Patek Philippe watch. The final price was $80,000. The fog vanished, replaced by a horrible, searing clarity. It wasn't a gamble. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated, cold-blooded theft, a conspiracy between my sister and my mother to liquidate my future and turn it into a collection of flashy, meaningless things. The betrayal was so immense, so complete, that I couldn't even cry. I just felt cold. "You have to tell your father," Isabel said gently. "Right now." I looked out the window at the bright Arizona sun. Everyone was preparing for a party, a celebration of the man whose trust had just been so thoroughly violated. And an idea began to form in my mind, an idea born of ice and fire. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Chloe has spent her entire life building a stage and performing on it. She loves an audience." I met my aunt's gaze. "Tonight, I'm going to give her one." When I returned home, I went to my closet and chose my dress. A floor-length gown in deep blood red silk. It was a dress that didn't ask for attention but commanded it. I did my makeup with meticulous care, creating a mask of perfect composure. When I was ready, I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw the calm in the eye of a hurricane. The drive to the country club was suffocatingly silent. My parents, oblivious, chatted about the guests. But in the rearview mirror, I saw Chloe watching me, a flicker of fear in her eyes as she took in my crimson dress and my empty, placid expression. She knew something had shifted. The stage was set. The storm was about to break. When I left the penthouse that night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just closed it behind me, and the heavy click of the lock sounded like a verdict. For the first time in my life, silence was not punishment. It was freedom. I didn't run to friends or to anyone who might ask questions. I found a small hotel tucked between a laundromat and a deli, the kind of place where the wallpaper curled at the edges and the receptionist barely looked up when you signed your name. I used a different last name, paid cash, and carried nothing but the clothes I wore. For once, anonymity felt like protection. No one there cared who I was. No one expected me to be anything. I slept for 20 hours straight, as if my body had been waiting years for permission to collapse. When I finally woke, the city outside felt sharper, louder, alive in a way it had never been through the glass walls of Park Avenue. I walked for hours with no destination, just letting the rhythm of my footsteps drown out the echo of my mother's voice. At some point, somewhere between a corner coffee shop and the river, I stopped and called Professor Finch. My voice trembled when I asked if the internship he'd mentioned months ago was still open. His answer, "Yes, come Monday," broke through me like sunlight. It wasn't just an opportunity. It was the first decision I had ever made entirely for myself. Meanwhile, the penthouse I left behind became a cage of a different kind. My mother hid the ledger as if it were contraband, a cursed object she could erase with denial. She carried on with her immaculate routines, her dinner parties, and her endless directives, pretending nothing had happened. My father abandoned their bedroom and moved into his study. The distance between them was no longer whispered, it was structural, carved into the walls of their house. Alex and Isabel were not so easily managed. They pressed for answers, cornered our parents with questions, but all they received were fragments. My father's silence carried the weight of shame, while my mother's words were knives. "Don't mention her name again. That girl chose to disgrace us." But the contradiction only sharpened the suspicion. Alex, the investor who lived by data, couldn't tolerate an unexplained variable. And Isabel, though slower to act, felt the pull of doubt each time she caught our father staring at the floor with haunted eyes. They called me, of course. Messages piled up on my phone unanswered. Alex's were sharp, impatient, demanding clarity. Isabel's were softer, uncertain, reaching for the sister she had dismissed for so long. I read them all and answered none. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. I had drawn the first boundary of my life. I would not step back into their fire until I was standing on ground that belonged to me. Those first weeks were a study in contrast. I lived on takeout and cheap coffee, but I also breathed freely. I walked into Professor Finch's office and shook his hand, not as the Davenport daughter, but as Olivia, the girl with ideas, with a mind of her own. He gave me stacks of papers to review, charts to annotate, and each night, when I returned to my hotel room exhausted, I felt something I had never felt under my mother's roof, earned satisfaction. Yet even in my anonymity, I could feel the silence from Park Avenue reaching me like a pulse, steady and insistent. Silence doesn't disappear. It builds pressure, and sooner or later, it demands to be broken. Alex never did well with unanswered questions. In business, uncertainty was poison, and he treated family the same way. The more my mother dismissed him with clipped phrases, the more restless he became. Isabel, who once parroted every word Eleanor fed her, began noticing the cracks, too. The way my father flinched when my name came up. The way my mother's voice grew brittle whenever the ledger was mentioned. The story that I had left in some fit of childish rebellion didn't match the tension curling through their house. One evening, when the walls of the penthouse had grown too tight with silence, Alex remembered someone Who might hold the missing piece? Helen, our father's long-retired assistant. Helen had always liked me, treating me with a kindness that felt almost forbidden in that household. If anyone had seen what my parents tried so hard to bury, it would be her. He drove out of the city and found her in a modest home with a small garden. At first, she hesitated, loyal, even in retirement. But Alex wasn't the boy who used to laugh at my warnings anymore. He pressed gently, asking about the state of the company 2 years ago, about the week when everything seemed to teeter on collapse. Helen's eyes softened, and finally the truth tumbled out. She told him about the panic in the office, the storm our father couldn't navigate, and how I, still practically a teenager, had walked in, clutching a worn leather notebook. She remembered how the very next day, Richard's entire demeanor changed. Calm, replacing chaos, disaster averted as if by magic. She remembered him ordering all drafts and memos from that week destroyed. And she remembered me standing in the doorway silent, as though I already knew my part in the story would never be told. Alex listened, speechless. When Helen's voice cracked with sympathy, "Your sister saved him. Alex saved all of you," and was made to disappear from her own triumph, the ground shifted beneath him. For the first time, he saw me, not as an eccentric shadow in the family, but as the axis around which the whole facade had spun. He left Helen's house with the truth burning in his chest, and when he returned to the city, he carried it straight to Isabel. At first, she resisted clinging to the version of reality my mother had crafted, but Alex laid out the details, each one a scalpel, cutting through her denial. By the time he finished, Isabel was pale, trembling, her eyes wet with the guilt she had never allowed herself to feel before. Together, they cornered Richard. It happened in the study late at night, the ledger hidden, but the weight of it pressing against every word. Alex demanded the truth, Isabel begged for it, and their father, our father, crumbled. The defiance drained from him like ink spilled across paper. He confessed everything, the reckless gamble, the near ruin, the miracle of my analysis, the way I had pulled them back from the brink. And then, the cruelest part, that Eleanor had insisted it remain secret, to protect Alex's pride, to preserve the illusion of the perfect family. The silence that followed his confession was heavier than any scream. Alex, who had built his life on the myth of his own brilliance, now understood that the foundation had been mine all along. Isabel, who had dismissed me as fragile and odd, saw with unbearable clarity that she had been the shallow one, blind to the depth, standing beside her. They both wept, not for me. I was gone from their reach. But for the selves they could never get back, the years wasted living in the shadow of a lie. My father slumped in his chair, the truth finally out, but too late to absolve him. My mother's absence in that moment was a statement in itself. She would never concede, never bend, never admit what she had done. What began as a family built on wealth and polish had turned into a courtroom without a judge, each of them forced to face the evidence of who they were and what they had allowed to happen. The truth had been sealed away in a leather notebook, but now it lived in their minds unerasable. And once you see clearly, you can't unsee. For the first time, my siblings truly knew me. Not as the quiet, awkward daughter in the corner, not as the scapegoat or the inconvenience, but as the one who had carried them when they were blind. And for the first time, they understood why I had left and why I might never come back. 1 year is both a blink and a lifetime. I measure it now in small proofs: a Brooklyn walk up that smells like roasted coffee on rainy mornings, a secondhand desk by a window that frames the East River like a living postcard, a stack of drafts with my initials in the margin, and Professor Finch's terse approvals in the corner. The internship became a job, then a title, and somewhere along the way, the girl who left a penthouse with empty hands learned how to sign her own name on contracts that had nothing to do with blood. I still keep odd hours. I still love quiet rooms. But the silence inside me isn't a wound anymore. It's a studio. Therapy taught me to name the ghosts and set them down gently. Work taught me to trust the part of my mind that has always been mine, the part that sees clearly. My circle is small. I have friends who don't care about my last name, only about whether I'll show up to help them move or remember their deadlines, or text them at midnight when they're unraveling. We celebrate wins with cheap Prosecco and take-out cartons, the kind of joy that leaves grease stains on the table and doesn't apologize. On Sundays, I walk to the farmer's market and practice choosing things simply because I want them peonies too bright for my old house peaches that bruise on the way home and still taste like summer. Wanting, I've learned, is not a crime. News from Park Avenue travels in fragments. My parents still share an address and almost nothing else. My father sleeps in the study. My mother keeps her rituals polished to a blinding shine. They attend the same events like diplomatic enemies, flawless on camera and silent in the car. Alex tried to wire shares into an account he opened in my name. I sent the transfer back with a note that said, "No restitution can be outsourced." He didn't argue. Instead, he started sending articles he thought I'd like, pieces that challenged their own assumptions. Isabel writes in ink that blots when she's nervous, long letters full of apologies and small memories I thought I'd lost. I write back sometimes, not to absolve the past, but to acknowledge the present. We are learning a new grammar. The day the magazine published my analysis, I read it once, then closed the tab and washed the dishes. Pride is less explosive than I imagined. It's a low fire that warms a room you built yourself. In the afternoon, I brought my laptop to a corner cafe and edited a colleague's draft, while strangers argued amiably about nothing at all. The sky over the avenue turned the soft gray that makes the city feel honest. When my phone buzzed, I didn't jump. Alex first just read your market piece. Precise, unsentimental, devastating in the best way. Coffee when you want your time, your place. A minute later, my father. Your mother would like to talk. Only if you're ready. No pressure. I am proud of you, Olivia. I read both twice. The old reflex rushed to fix, rushed to soothe rose and fell like a tide I no longer live by. I set the phone face down and watched the window fog slightly where my breath touched the glass. Choice is quieter than revenge. It looks like finishing an edit before answering a text. It looks like deciding that forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be something I give because I want to, not because I'm cornered by history. It looks like understanding that my mother's sentence did not kill me. It named a boundary I finally honored. I paid for my coffee, slipped the phone into my pocket, and stepped back into a city that no longer felt like a test. Outside, people hurried, laughed, carried their disappointments and groceries with the same determined grace. I stood there for a moment, letting the noise braid itself into something almost musical, and a small, steady smile found me. I didn't text back. Not yet. The power is not in the reply. It's in the fact that I can decide when and if there will be one. That is the life I built from the wreckage. Not a perfect picture, but a true one framed by my own hands. In the end, I realized storms don't just destroy, they also clear the sky. What's broken can't always be mended, but from the cracks, a new life can begin. Strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising with a clearer heart and choosing a path that belongs to you. That's all for now. Thank you for walking through this with me. If you've ever carried wounds where love was supposed to be, if you've ever stood at the edge of leaving or staying, or if you simply understand even from afar, just say yes. Sometimes healing begins with listening, sometimes with speaking, sometimes with knowing you're not alone. Here, at least, none of us have to be. Until next time, take care of yourself. Healing takes time, but it's worth every step.